Hello, and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansbury.
And Amy Cornell.
And so this show was inspired by somebody that we now refer to in team meetings as ChatGPT person. And this was an author who came to us and is writing all their books on ChatGPT. And if you can't hear how horrified I am, I wish you could see my face right now. I actually called Amy right after I got off the phone with this author, and I was just like, oh my gosh, it's happening.
Yep. It was one of those things. It's like, okay, we check that off the list. Every day we say, all right, we've seen it all. And then we haven't.
Well, and the idea behind this person writing these books is that they wanted to write a whole bunch of nonfiction books. So we are leaning into the nonfiction, the nonfiction author for this. They wanted to write a whole bunch of nonfiction books through chat, like 50 books a year, 50 books a year to make money, to quit their job. And this person is not going to be the only one. So other than just being generally like horrified, and then this author told me, and I'm like, wait, you're using ChatGPT to write all your books? And I'm sure that I just sounded super judgmental because I was very judgmental. And then this author said, well, but I'm having an editor make the book sound more human. And I'm
sure
like,
that editor is thrilled.
You what?
I'm sure that editor is thrilled. They're like, we are like, this is my life now.
Right, exactly. So I have to take this robot speak and turn it into something that people can understand. But the reason that we mention this is because, and this is not to be like, this is not a downer show at all, because this is a show that we would have done even if I hadn't talked to this person, but he just kind of inspired it. Because when I asked them, I said, okay, so you've written a book on, there was these different specific topics. I said, what's your expertise in, because this author came to us with a few books because they were already spit them out, right? And I said, what's your expertise in such and such? And there was literally no expertise. So it was just this. So the idea was just putting books out there and hoping that something sticks. And that's a really bad strategy. So I suspect by book number 30, this author is going to be like, oh, this was a mistake. However, all of these books are still clogging the pipeline. So we still get, and then this author said to me, like, can I do media for this? I'm like, absolutely not. And actually, that's exactly what I said. I'm like, without hesitation, I don't even need to read the books. Absolutely no media. And part of the reason is because the media has become so much, for a while they become so much more selective, right? This is not a new AI thing. But in order to get yourself into or on television, even local, right? If you've written a topic about fitness or business or parenting or, saving money, you'd better be aces at all of those. Like, you'd better have some platform.
Right. Exactly.
Because Amy, when somebody comes in and talking about maybe setting up a call or something, other than maybe the book cover and their Amazon retail page, isn't that the first thing that you look at?
Yeah, that's always, I definitely, because we ask for it. So I want to check out their website. If the book's already out or if they've written a book before, I want to see what those look like, what the branding's like, what the reviews are like. You know what I mean? Because basically I'm putting myself in the position of somebody that is being pitched this book, you know? So if I'm going to go online and see what the whole deal is about this author, this person, and why they're writing about this, I want to see what the media is going to see or can't find, essentially. Like, where are the holes? Like, what are we working with here?
Yeah.
And that is huge. It makes a really, and it doesn't mean, and for what it's worth, for anybody listening, it doesn't mean we won't work with that author by any means, but it definitely changes our recommendations.
Yeah.
We've talked about that a lot. We do not put price tags on hopes and dreams and be like, oh, yeah, we'll do all the things that are going to make you feel important. That is not what we do here.
Right.
So if you don't have an established platform and if you don't have an extensive background in something that is actually competitive with the people that are getting coverage by the media, then we want to help you with those incremental steps that are going to get you there at some point if you want to keep putting in the effort.
Well, and I think, Amy, to your point, I think that sometimes the steps can be incremental. So if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I'm a nonfiction author, I don't really have the relevant, I have great ideas, but I don't really have the relevant credentials. I mean, I think there are easy ways that you can start, right? And, maybe it's in like education or training, because that's something that the media,
Mm-hmm.
local or national, is going to look for. What's your professional experience, right? What
Right.
hands-on experience do you have that relates to this? What other books have you published, right? Or it doesn't even have to be books. It could be, white papers, or maybe you have a blog that you've been running for years. And the other thing is past media. So this is so media likes media, right? And a lot of authors, I'm actually writing a book now on local promotion, right? I decided I really wanted to get just away from Amazon for a beat and get super granular on some of these different strategies that authors that I really feel, or that Amy and I both collectively have discussed, really overlook. And one of those is local. So if you're in this position where you're like, oh, I have this book not written by ChatGPT and I have some experience, but I really feel like I need more of a platform, doing some local media, um finding local angles, maybe even to national stories, right? Um could potentially be good, but any kind of past media experience all adds to your platform.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times, and we talk about this a lot, you get too close to your own work. So I think this happens for nonfiction authors a lot too, Penny, is that when we ask them, we try to pull different ideas out of them in terms of what we can tap into. And they're so focused on what their book talks about, and they want to get their book out there and they want to talk about the book. And they sometimes forget, without some brainstorming time, which is what we focus a lot of our prep work on for our clients, is there's other ways to show that you have potential for media. And it doesn't have to be so laser focused on your specific book content.
True.
That's where
Yeah.
creative messaging and having a background in anything that shows you have some sort of authority really does matter. And this is not a time to be shy or to be humble. So any kind of awards or recognitions that you've received over the years, professional industry bodies, like you said, local, there's a lot of things that you can do locally in different sectors as well. There's Rotary clubs, things like that. People forget that all these different connections show that you're tuned in to what's going on. Speaking engagements, obviously, if you've ever done speaking, and again, even the ones conferences, maybe it was 5 years ago before you even had your book idea, but don't leave anything on the table. If you're working with a team that is trying to pull this out of you, give it to them, because it's amazing what you can do with all of your professional background when you know how to get creative with how to use it and how to present it. And then obviously, if you've had a leadership role of any sort, whether maybe you're an entrepreneur locally and you have a business, but if you also, your professional career, again, it doesn't have to be directly tied into, it needs to be related to your book, but I do think that sometimes authors limit themselves because my book is about this, but my background has covered a few different things, and you know what I mean? But it's like, you can use all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You can definitely, you can use all of that for sure. And honestly, okay, so not to get too far off of the topic, but we've had fiction authors who have really interesting and fascinating backgrounds that I have mentioned, like when I've done coaching with them after the, as we start to work with them, where I've said, because like we had an author that used to go on all these geological digs, like all over the world, right? And how fascinating is that? And, it did to some extent relate to the topic that she wrote about, even though she wrote fiction. But it was such an interesting facet of who this person was as an author that I told her, I said that really set her apart and told her to lean into that because I thought it would be really interesting. So I think that we spend, we get, as Amy said, we get a little too close to our own topics. We spend a lot of time obsessing over this isn't an exact match. It doesn't actually really have to be. I mean, look, I've I've had this business for 25 years. I talk about book marketing and publicity, but then I also talk about, okay, so then I have these books on Amazon and I have these books on, and at some point the umbrella becomes sort of like this holder of all of these different things that you do. And that adds to your platform and your credibility. If you don't have a website, don't lean into social media. I mean, you should be on LinkedIn for sure, because that's going to be a great place, especially in particular for nonfiction. But it also sort of depends. I mean, we've talked to nonfiction authors who who would do better actually on Instagram than they would on LinkedIn. So that's where you kind of have to make that choice. Um, Bragging rights, reviews, testimonials, endorsements from peers, all of this stuff should get that's social proof. It should get put up on your website. Bragging rights.
Mhm.
Seriously, that's really where a lot of authors forget. Oh, I did such and such, or I did such and such, and it's nowhere on. And a lot of times it comes out in my conversation with them, but it's nowhere on. It's nowhere on their website.
Right.
You
No,
know.
that's a very good point. And Penny, I know you pick up on this a lot when you talk to people, and I think it's underestimated because again, we're talking about books and book marketing, and that's kind of where all of this builds from. But an author's ability to communicate clearly and be engaging and talk off the cuff and in a conversation where everything is not. So that's something else to consider. So if you're a nonfiction author and you really want to start getting media coverage, you really have to either be very honest with yourself, like, are you good at that kind of stuff? And if you're not, you need to work on it,
Yeah.
because you can't sit there and read a book on the morning news. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they are not going to let you sit there and read from your book. They want to have an engaging, same thing with a podcast. You know what I mean? Those are conversations. You need to be able to talk about higher level concepts above and beyond what's in your book and how they relate into what's going on in the world or in your industry or something, you know what I mean? Or for your topic. And you have to be engaging and interesting and give people something that they haven't heard 15 times. And if
Yes.
that sounds like a lot of pressure, it should. Getting media coverage is a big freaking deal.
Yeah. It's a
You
big.
don't just get it because you wrote a book, you know?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
really have to bring a lot to the table. And so not only do you have to be engaging and interesting and be able to talk above and beyond what your book is, but, another point that we're going to cover that Penny, you should take that one, but relating it back to what matters right now,
Yeah.
because your book is not going to be what's newsworthy. It's your ability to make it make sense for the audience that you are speaking to and make it about them.
Right. Right. Exactly. And that's where staying dialed into things that are going on in your industry and even industry adjacent, right? So things that are happening around your industry. And I have spent my entire, professional career doing that around publishing. And sometimes, and I'm sure it's like super annoying, but sometimes I'll send Amy like an email with some links. Look at all these new things. I'm super, because I get like, because I read all this stuff and I get like super excited. I'm like, oh, look at all this, blah, blah, blah stuff. But it truly all matters. And the other thing though, too, is that I think you will be a much more interesting interview if you have these other bites of information and how they relate to potentially to your industry and what's coming down the pike. Um, in terms of like the news cycle or a current topic. So every time, so I know that Harrow has since gone away. I mean, it's come back a little bit, helpareporterout.com, but there is a news service called SOS, and I don't remember what it stands for, but the same guy that started Help a Reporter Out started this new place. And basically, it's a place just to get media leads. And it's even if you don't plan on responding to any of them, right? I mean, like, oh, I'm not really ready for that. That's fine. But you should really get a sense of what the media is looking for. I think that's really important because you want to know how are people, like, especially if you have a particular expertise in a topic, how is the media really looking at this? What are they looking for? What are they speaking to? And if nothing else, it can give you ideas for your social media and for blogging topics and things like that. I mean, again, if you're not ready for the big time yet, and that's fine, and it's okay to admit that, this will really give you a great sense of what the media is looking for. And sometimes it's very surprising, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and if you're looking at, so one of the things that I love to encourage authors to do is find a local angle on a national topic because local media loves that. So if you have, something, so we had an author, this was several years ago, and this author wrote a book on bullying, and there was another sadly school shooting, and I told this author, I said, okay, you have to and we didn't have an active campaign with him at the time. But I said, all right, this is a really good opportunity for you. Get out. The media is going to want to talk to you, even just your local media. Talk about, you know, does bullying have anything, is, is bullying part of as like a symptom? Like, is it, turn your topic to the degree that you can into different little book hooks. I used to actually teach a class. I loved teaching this class on book hooks, right? I used to love oh my gosh. One of the coaching things that I used to do with authors was just a call on doing book hooks, right? And it was really, really, really fun. And one of the hooks that we did was, and this was funny because I was living in New York at the time and it was a huge snowstorm and this person wrote a book on just like getting along, like families who don't get along, like how to make peace, how to get along, whatever. And every airplane was like grounded and the trains were grounded and all this other stuff. And the pitch was when airplanes and trains don't leave on time. And this was like right after Thanksgiving or something. So, what we did with this author is we took her book about how to, you know, family dynamics, things like that, and we angled it to a specific thing that was going on in the news, big news, snowstorm, everything shut down, people stuck in airports, sleeping on the floor, all the things, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at. And also, we've done a couple of shows on this too, right, Amy? I mean, on timing things to events like financial planner doing something around tax day or something like that,
Yes.
right? But the other thing,
Exactly.
go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I love these examples. Or, if you've written a book about parenting, like do something for back to school. And you might go, but my book is not about school necessarily. It's about this, but it's like, yeah, but you can talk about what goes on with back to school and mental health and getting your kids prepped. Like that's where we talk about getting out of your own way and getting more creative with how you can use your expertise without sitting there and going like, but no, but my book doesn't say this. It's like, yeah, but your book will benefit from you getting this coverage. Talk about what needs to be talked about and your book will organically benefit from that.
I know, I'm glad you mentioned the back to school thing. I consulted one time. I don't think we may have, Amy has oftentimes, many times, the majority of times, a better memory than I do. And there was an author and who wrote a cookbook on like sandwiches, which is awesome because we love bread and all the things. I may have just consulted with her. This goes back a ways. And one of the things that I encouraged her to do for back to school was fun, easy back to school kids sandwich ideas. And she did the same thing. She was like, but that's not really in my book. I'm like, I don't care. that's not what we're doing. We're, fun, easy, go on television because you have a whole book about sandwiches. So it's not like you're talking about, you're teaching people how to do yoga when you wrote a book on sandwiches. Like it is,
Right.
it's in the same, own the pond you're in. I had somebody in publishing industry who has since passed away say that for years. Own the pond that you're in. So that's kind of that's kind of what we're talking about is
Mhm.
become this voice for, and she did actually really well on,
Right.
she did really, really well on this topic. And so looking at specific dates, looking at, back the seasons, back to school, things like that. But the other thing that I want to mention before we move on to the next one is by the time it happens, it's over.
Right.
So if you're thinking about doing back to school, you probably want to start now.
Hmm.
Right, because I'm already seeing like the back to school stuff and all this other. Um, if you have a topic you can tie into, let's say Valentine's Day or something, um, start, you could potentially start in January, early in January, but I would actually start earlier than that. Think about stores. Think about like, so anybody who knows me knows that I like really love Costco and they're already putting out their Halloween stuff, which I know sounds like super crazy. Like usually at least it's most places usually wait until Labor Day or whatever, but not anymore, right? So that what that tells me is that people are ready for, and especially if you've had like a really hot, unbearable summer, which I know Amy, I can't see her, but I'm very sure she's nodding her head right now. Um, People are starting to think about things a lot earlier. So
Right.
when you start to see it in stores, that's like your cue to, oh, I better start to get moving on this.
That's a really good point. And Penny, you touched on earlier, you mentioned kind of in passing, if you're not ready for that in terms of going after people, but use it for ideas for your blog, for social media, stay on top of what's being covered and start getting your voice out there in ways that do make sense for where you're at, and
Yeah.
that could simply be content. And I wanted to, on top of that, mention it's also great to be realistic about what you're ready for in terms of if you're going to hire a firm, know where your strengths are
Yeah.
and have some healthy respect for what you still need to work on, because it's so much easier for us to develop a plan with a client that goes, and we've had them say all the time, I really don't want to do, like, I don't want to be on a TV. I don't want to be seen. You know what I mean? That where they understand their limits.
Yeah.
So if you are really more comfortable in writing format, then share that. If you're going to be working with the team, share that or lean into that and look for and reach out for guest opportunities or adding content to an industry newsletter or something like that that really suits your strengths. So that's another thing that when authors come to us and it's like, I wrote a book, I want all the things, I want to be on TV, I want to be on all the podcasts, I want all the things. But it's like, if you don't have a background in that, if you're not really well versed in how that goes, then you may not want to jump into that right away. And a lot of times Penny and I will say, like, that's not a good place to start for you. We suggest you start here.
Yeah.
But in terms of getting more yeses and having more wins and building your resume, it's really smart to be realistic about where your skill set is and what you're really ready for and build toward those more challenging, like we talked about, what you have to bring to the table to do an interview or to be on television is huge. And that is not for the faint of heart. And you can't just walk up the street and pull that off.
Yeah.
So really be smart about how you want to build your resume and how you can develop those skills along the way. So when you do get to the point where you're ready to pitch for those opportunities, you're going to blow it. You're going to, wow them and just knock it out of the park.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think the other piece of it, I'm really glad that you brought that up, that you brought that up, Amy, is that we always encourage you to dream big, right? Realistically, like dream big, but make a plan, right? That's kind of our motto. But if you're not really ready for big media just because, like your writing group is just like, oh my gosh, you did great. Now you're going to be on all the major shows and all this other stuff. Start small, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to, I mean, we love local, but if you're going to get your sea legs, you may as well, it's a good idea to do that locally, right? Because
Mhm.
that will teach you, doing local media will teach you so much just about, you know, how TV works, how radio works, how fast you have to be on your feet,
Oh, yeah.
which is, I remember I used to do a ton of local for myself. And for some reason, I guess I got into a loop through a press club or something, and they were doing a lot of stories on publishing. And so there was a year where I was just doing these all the time. And it never, every single time that I went on local, it always never ceases to amaze me how fast you have to move. And it also, the other thing to realize too, and I know we're not really talking about media training specifically, although maybe there's merit to doing a show on that. Remember that the people who are interviewing you have not studied on your topic. They don't know your topic. They probably haven't even read your book.
Right. Good point.
They have no they may even, because a lot of times, and I know this because I have a neighbor who is works for a local news station and started out as a producer and is now doing, anchor stuff and all this other, I mean, they're doing like 5 or 6 different jobs. They probably don't have the time to even, like, how do you pronounce, like, the last thing they're going to ask you is how do you pronounce your name? And that's
Right.
going to be it. And that is basically what they know going in,
Right.
because there's just not a lot of time. So you also have to be prepared. If you come prepared with knowledge, and this doesn't mean that you have to have hours and hours of media training, but if you come prepared for all the things, the questions, and all this other, and this is, I know we started off making fun of ChatGPT author, but this is a really good place to use ChatGPT actually, just to kind of bounce some, like, what kind of questions could I expect? Or here's what's going on, here's what I'm angling to, and really have it throw out some stuff, and then maybe work with somebody just to kind of get ready. But you, the more you know about your topic, the better that you will show up on camera and the more authoritative that you will seem.
Mhm.
And never, ever, ever say, it's in my book, you should just read my book.
Oh God. Yeah.
Because I've seen authors do that. I'm just like, ooh, yeah, your career is just really your career.
Talk to my agent.
Talk to my agent. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So Penny, can we run through these last few bullets real quick? Because I thought these were really
Yes.
insightful.
Yes. And why don't you start off? Because I know you and I have many discussions about bullet number 1. So do you take that one?
Right. So we're going to start off with we pulled a short list of things that media does not consider sufficient. And that is not just us. These are quite literally, Penny and I can attest to the fact, these are standards. These are not Penny and Amy's opinion. This is quite literally how things work. So don't be mad at us directly for saying this. This is, like you said, with what to expect at an interview. They're not going to read your book. This is kind of on the heels of that. This is just the reality of what you're competing with. Just having a book is not sufficient for being an expert and being ready for media coverage. So the book is helpful. It shows that you are interested in your topic, that you're dedicated to your topic. But honestly, media prefers authors that have really strong subject matter credentials or a unique story versus the book.
Yeah.
We mentioned this previously. Your book will organically benefit from you getting coverage. So when we talked previously about angling what you can talk about based on what's going on in the world or locally, whether it's back to school, whether it's, tax season, all these kind of things, talk about that, even if it's not directly related to your book topic, and your book will benefit. Plus, you're
Yeah.
building your resume as a thought leader. So just having a book doesn't count. You have to bring more to the table.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And then I think that they may be asking for your opinion. And that's, if you ask me for my opinion, obviously, sometimes this podcast is all about our opinions, right? But we also have a lot of experience.
Right.
So if we throw out our opinions, they may not be right. They may not be something that you agree with. We have a lot of experience. So anecdotal experience isn't enough. I mean, you have to really have,
Right.
let's throw something out there.
Yeah, we see that a lot where people, and we get it. And we've done a show, I believe we've done a show on the difference between like self-help versus like a memoir. I believe we've done a show on that where there's a
Yeah.
really fine line sometimes because you experience something doesn't necessarily make you an expert on it. And you have to be really careful about what your goals are depending on what your experience is and what your background is and what that book really should be and the kind of coverage you should be asking for,
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
expected to get. And then, calling yourself an expert, that kind of goes with it, but it really needs to be substantiated. Just because, again, you have strong opinions on something or you've experienced something, that doesn't make you an expert in the eyes of the media because they owe their readership, listenership, viewership more than that.
Right.
So
Right.
you have to keep that in mind. It is not just about whether or not the timing's right or your store or your pitch is good. They have to report back to who they are catering to. And they have to put people in front of them that are legitimate experts that can add value in some way. And
Right.
they're on the hook for that. So if
Yeah.
you can't show them that you have that, they are not going to put you on television. They are not going to interview you because they owe their viewership, their followers more than that.
Right. Exactly. And this is where, um, so as you are starting to build your professional credibility, make sure to put everything on your website. There's no brag too small to put on your websites because if you're going to because the media does the media will, even though I just said that like my neighbor guy is like super super busy, the media will research to make sure that they're not being duped by somebody who says they're an expert but really just wrote a
Right.
parenting book because they have one kid or something. You know what I mean? Like, um,
Or 6 kids doesn't make you good at it.
right, right, exactly. So press mentions, media likes media. That's what I said. Sometimes it's great to start out with local media. I recommend don't say no to any media. I mean, unless it's obviously completely misaligned from what you want to talk about. Like I get that.
Mhm.
Display it all prominently on your website. Media kits, really important.
Yes.
You know,
It shows dedication. Even if you don't think you need it yet, it shows you're serious about what you're doing, right, Penny? Like it's one of those
exactly.
things that it's a next level element that shows that you are taking this seriously and you're showing up with receipts that you've got what it takes.
Right. Showing up for receipts. I love that you said that. I also think that when it comes to social media, you don't have to be everywhere, just be everywhere that matters. So you don't have to be on all of the platforms. Find one that you feel resonates most with your audience and then own that, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
I love the last one because
you want to
sorry.
you want to take the last one?
Well, no, because I think of you all the time because Penny's been, I'm giving her like a, courtesy clap here because she's been working on doing more video. It's not easy.
Oh my gosh.
So work on delivering short, media-friendly sound bites, something that somebody might be able to use in an interview, on television, whatever it is. But honestly, challenge yourself, put your camera on, selfie mode on your phone and record a video with you giving a tip and then watch that back and see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Chances are you're going to go, "Ooh, that wasn't great. I could do better." You're not ready yet. Work on that. Even that simple exercise of recording yourself, giving a tip, talking about one, like Penny mentioned, using ChatGPT to like generate some questions that could potentially be thrown at you. I thought that was brilliant, Penny. Answer some of those questions, but do it with your video running and see what you look like delivering those answers. And do you look ready to be on TV? Or did you deliver it in a way that would be engaging and interesting on a podcast, or would the person start doing the fast forward button,
Right. Right. Exactly. And I think that the more that you can identify those sound bites, those little micro conversations that you can have, which again, and in doing video is really not easy. And if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I can ramble because I ramble all the time in the shows. I'm like, oh, we're talking about blah blah, and I'm sure that Amy, because we never have our video on because we're never like really camera ready, but I'm sure Amy sometimes she's sitting there, she's like, oh my gosh, here she goes, like it's not easy to talk about sound bites, but the more you can practice,
Mm-hmm.
the better that you will be. Clearly, I still need lots of practice, but um, So I think, I think, did we cover everything?
We did. I thought this was a great show. I'm really glad we had the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I know it's been sitting in our like idea doc for a while. Or the kind of the idea behind the show. And then ChatGPT author showed up and it was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a problem. We have to do this. You have to really level up your, you have to really level up your game. So we hope that you've enjoyed this. We love show ideas. If you have show ideas, send those our way. We love that. And we want to just give a shout out to some of the new reviews that we've gotten recently. We love reviews. And Amy found, we've always said on these podcasts, like, oh, it's so difficult to post a review on Apple Podcasts. Amy found a really cool thing. She's going to put that in the show notes. So now it should be super easy to post a review on Apple Podcasts. So we would love to hear from you. Again, feel free to reach out to us anytime. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.